Welcome to the Watts Wellness Podcast. My name is Corey Watts.
And my name is Sanchia Watts.
Based in Perth, Western Australia, both of us have been on our own self-development journeys for many years now, which has led to this moment.
The intention behind the Watts Wellness Podcast is to help you meet yourself deeply as you navigate your own human experience.
Become present in this moment.
Take a deep belly breath.
And be open to receiving this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Watts Wellness Podcast. It is good to be back after a long break. We pre-recorded some episodes earlier in the year, and Sanch, we're back in the studio, new and improved, I might add.
Yeah, the studio's had a big revamp and a reshape. There's fresh energy in here, and it feels good to go.
We got plants next to us in abundance, and it's feeling very green and lush, and yeah, it's good. We me and Mum set some goals with the pottery just after New Year's around. After we listened to our manifestation episode, actually, back in episode 12, acted on a few things and we're getting moving for 2024.
It's exciting. I feel like, we're into 2024 now and this month's like almost halfway gone, which is crazy. I think when this comes out, we will be halfway through the month.
Yeah, just about, yeah.
So time is flying by, as always. And I think in today's episode, I felt this real call to really inspire people for the new year and just be that little extra boost of motivation and maybe help people reset a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a general chat today. We obviously did our episode on manifesting in episode 12. So if you haven't listened to that, make sure you head back and check that out. But it's a bit of a refresher course, going over some new concepts as well and just, trying to sort of revitalize, is that the word?
Yeah.
Revitalize you guys for 2024 and get the energy moving. Because I think coming out of like that holiday period, as we mentioned, it can feel a bit stagnant. It is hard sometimes to get the ball rolling, and we're hoping to do that a little bit for you today. But we, as always, will start off with our strength and challenge of the year. It's actually our first one of the year. So, Sanch, did you want to take her away with that one?
Sure. The strength has been probably the socializing that's been done over the last few weeks. Lots of time with friends and family. We went down south and we were camping for a little bit, and that was really wholesome, really beautiful. And then the challenge lately has probably been that same thing too, of just almost burning out the social battery a little bit and then having to recoup and realign with my own values and goals. I've decided I'm actually not going to be drinking any alcohol for the next 3 months. So I'm ready for this little challenge. And I think I've only ever drunk alcohol with the intention of I'm consciously choosing to partake in this. And I think just over the last few weeks probably went into slight excess with all of that, as you do over the Christmas period and New Year's. And I'm just ready for some health and wealth and really keen to just get aligned and get all poisons and toxins out of my body. That's my goal. What about you? What's your strength and challenge been?
Yeah, nice one. I think that's a good one for you to undertake. It's
Thanks,
always a bit of fun with that one. Love it. That wasn't insinuating that you like drink a lot or anything like that. But yeah, no. I think for me, it's been, nice. Probably about coming into the new year, I think. Been sort of going down the coaching path. I started a new little Instagram with that, which has been the Masculine Formula. I'll plug it. So feel free to check that out if you're a guy and you want to have a tune into some all things masculinity and wellness. But I think the struggle with that has been, and we sort of spoke a bit about it in last week's episode with Sean, around just it's hard to like promote like what you're doing but not like coach people that aren't ready to be coached in a sense. Like my first post, like I just had some people that were like quite argumentative around like the statement that I made around masculinity, and I sort of realized at that point like you really can't help people that aren't ready to be helped and aren't ready to sort of accept that stuff in. Like it sort of goes back to the call of change stuff, but it's often like you get told stuff early in your life and it won't make sense until you're ready to sort of accept it and hear it. So that was just interesting. It sort of forced me to sort of change my approach a little bit and sort of be a bit more suggestive. But, you know, we've experienced that with the podcast at times as well, like not wanting to jump on here and, you know, almost coach the listeners, I guess. And it's more around, so we hope that people don't feel that way, and it is more around that we are just offering up little bits of wisdom and little bits of advice, and feel free to take anything on board that works. But yeah, I think that was probably sort of the main struggle. I think the strength has been around just discipline. That was going to be my word for the year, and I think at the moment I've been nailing that. Training and diets have been extreme. The amount of times I've had to say no to a little chocolate or whatever it is at the moment has been pretty, abundant. There's been many times that's been said, especially through the Christmas period. But yeah, I'd say that's been my main sort of strength at the moment. Some people would say it's probably, too disciplined. You got to have balance, but I just think for me and my goals at the moment, that's sort of what's required. So
fair enough.
Yeah, it's good.
Nice. Yeah, I think we've obviously talked about it a little bit behind the scenes, but the feedback that we mostly get for this podcast is people just say it really does help them just make little changes and little realignments in their own personal life. And that's our intention, just to help even just one person in any way that we can. We trust that like the people tuning in are open to receiving whatever comes in each episode.
Yeah, definitely. And no exception today. We're going to be chatting about some stuff that's, how would you describe it? It's just real like Kickstarter stuff, I suppose, that we sort of wanted to dive into a little bit today for the year.
Yeah, and we reflected on those 8 elements of wellness that we chatted about in episode 1. And I think there was sort of this call to really lean in and chat more about sort of the spiritual elements, the emotional, maybe the mental as well. Just sort of trying to get our mental health in check at the start of the year. It's really important not to burn out this early on in the year. And so hopefully these tips and tricks that just naturally flow today are going to help you guys to reset. I did a little meditation before we wrote down what we were going to chat about on the whiteboard. And I've done this a little bit in the past, but today I just said to Corey, I was like, look, I really want to just channel and see what comes through in this episode. And some stuff poured out and we're just going to flow with it today.
Yeah, we are. So I was just reading like some of the stuff that we're going to go into, and yeah, it'll be exciting and a good thing to listen to for sure.
Yeah. So the first thing that really came through just then when I sat down to really think about what do people need to hear was trusting in your path. I think this is something that we sort of all know about, but to really grasp this topic of trusting wholeheartedly in your path, it means sort of accepting the good and the bad in quotation marks, just allowing yourself to honor exactly where you're at right now. Take a moment to pause and just reflect and trust that you're on the right path. Even if it doesn't feel aligned for you right now, you're always exactly where you're supposed to be. And that concept may be really hard for people to grasp, but I also think a lot of people just need to be reminded of that. There can be this like urge to really obtain and achieve all those goals and manifestations at the very start of the year. And I think people also need to remember to pause and just trust where they're at.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think that kind of comes back to a little bit with the episode though around almost spirituality and stuff, when you have that sort of belief in a higher power and that you are held sort of by that. It can be a really good alleviator of sort of the worries and stuff of like, is this the right way that I'm going? Is this direction I should be taking? So I think that one sort of comes back to that in a sense. We sort of spoke a little bit around like manifestation as well. Like just because you're on a path doesn't mean that you can't, take steps towards a new one, if that makes sense. So I think you got to be careful that you don't get in the mindset of like, oh, I'm on this path now. It's not where I want to be, but I'm going to take no action and no tangible steps to then get on a new one. Did you want to have a little?
Yeah, I totally agree. Even if you are in that point where you're like, none of this is aligning and I'm not feeling it and I need to change, but how do I do this? Like, I think people just need to remember that they don't need to have all the steps figured out straight away. It naturally unfolds as it's meant to, and you're always learning a lesson. You can literally learn a lesson from every single day that you have. And I think people just need to be reminded of that. But then, yeah, of course, also recognize they can make changes whenever they really want to. People are the creators of their reality and they can just go and give it a crack, which sort of ties in well to the next point that just flew at me. It was like unleashing potential. I think that's going to be another really big theme of this year. And I've actually heard a few other spiritual teachers and people talk about this. 2023 was very much about learning lessons. And 2024, when you add up those numbers, 2, 2, and 4, it equals 8. And so this year is the year of the 8. And that number in numerology represents abundance and ambition. And I think this year is really about implementing the lessons that were learnt last year and really unleashing your potential as a human being here on planet Earth during this time.
Yeah, I'll play a bit of devil's advocate on that one a little bit and sort of, because I know the answer that I think I want you to say, but, we'll have a bit of fun with it.
Okay.
My thing is I think a lot of people with that sort of stuff will listen and go, oh, like it's the year of wealth or like year of creation. So but everyone can't be wealthy. So how do we go about making that the reality for us, and why does it not just happen for everybody if that is the overarching year? Because it's not as though that it's year 2024 for me, but 2026 for the neighbor, if that makes sense. So why is it only a wealthy year for some people and they really do bring that abundance in? Why does that happen for some people but not for others?
Well, I think obviously everyone has different leveling degrees of wealth and abundance. You don't have to necessarily just be financially abundant. You can be abundant in so many other areas of your life. And this year has an extra emphasis on abundance in all aspects. Like, you might be abundant in your relationships. You might be abundant with the emotion of joy. You might just feel joyful more times than not this year. Or perhaps it could be financial as well, and you really do tap into that level of abundance. And I think the reason why a lot of people don't actually reach that level of abundance that they want to obtain is because, one, they either don't believe that they're actually worthy of it on a subconscious level, or they still have some money or abundant blocks that they need to heal through and work through. And so it comes down to everyone's subconscious programming and what they were fed growing up, which ultimately does shape and create your thoughts, which then shapes and creates your reality. So I think this year, when it came through that people need to unleash their potential, it was almost like everyone has the capacity to be great. They really, really do. Everybody has that capacity. But some people just don't go for it, either because they're fearful that they won't get there. They're either fear of failure or they're fear of success. And I think it's really important this year that people realize that it's time to actually shift those beliefs and do the work so that you can actually help others to get there as well. We all know there's like a huge rise in consciousness happening on the planet right now. If you weren't aware of that, I encourage you to go read up on it. But this is a year where it's really, really time for you to unleash your potential and remember that you have the power to choose and create anything that you want to do this year. And a lot of the time as well, that comes back to letting go of attachments. In order to actually move into a new identity and a new way of being, you have to let go of those old versions of you, which is such a process. Like, you and I would both know about letting go of old identities. We've had to do that in order to be here right now.
Yeah, I'd say so, like changes in values and different things like that. I kind of want to like link back a little bit into like the consciousness thing. Like, do you want to explain that a little bit and talk about that?
Sure.
I think letting go of attachment is something we've spoken about a fair bit through the podcast, and people probably have a bit of a grasp on. We can revisit that if you want, but I think it's more interesting to have a chat about like the consciousness thing, because I'm aware about it a little bit, but not heaps. So
yeah.
I'd like to hear.
There are a lot of great teachers on YouTube that talk about 5D and the fifth dimension, which is something that is occurring globally right now. And from a lot of spiritual teachers and practices, we've learned that humanity is rising in their level of consciousness, and people are beginning to really wake up. And some people are definitely still on leveling degrees of consciousness. And consciousness to me is really about self-awareness and awareness of what's happening all around you and also internally. And so these levels of consciousness are beginning to rise, and more people are beginning to see more of a bird's eye view of what's going on overall. It's less about me, and more about us and community. And I always say this, but in the word community, there is unity. And I think we're moving towards a space of a more equal world, but it's going to take some time to get there. But people are beginning to wake up and see the unjust that's occurring in the world. And that's why you're having so many movements and so much adversity occurring on the planet right now to help even more people wake up and shift. And I listened to a really great podcast the other day. The Know Thyself podcast is awesome if anyone's interested in diving deeper into this world. But they talked about how every different human on the planet has a different level of consciousness. And the interviewer asked, why is that? Like, why aren't we all just up there and open and ready to help? And the guy said, he was a bit of a guru. He eventually said that Earth would be really, really boring if everyone was awake. There wouldn't be any lessons to be learned because everyone would have achieved that level of consciousness and unity, and conflict wouldn't exist. And conflict actually helps you just to meet yourself on a deeper level. When you have internal conflicts, there's normally external conflicts occurring in your life. Everything's a bit of a mirror, and slowly people are beginning to realize that. And there is a rise in humanity's uplifting of consciousness at the moment. So have a look into it if that does interest you. I think it's a hard topic to talk about because I know there's a lot of people that don't agree with this stuff, and we've got a very wide audience. We've got some athletes that listen to us, and then we've also got my sound healing community, and trying to blend these two worlds so that they make sense for people can be actually really challenging. But hopefully that's made sense to some people. And yeah, I guess in linking back to these things that have come through for this episode, letting go of attachments was a big one. And it's important just to remember it's a process to unleash your potential, and it's a process to actually let go of the attachments and things that no longer serve you.
Yeah, really interesting. So where do we go from here?
Well, there is a new moon today in Capricorn while we're recording this as well. And I think, you know, it's all about making space, clearing out the old so you can welcome in the new. And so even though it can be really challenging to let go of things that no longer serve you, I really do encourage people to get clear on that and start to believe in your abilities. Accepting help was another big theme that came through. I think a lot of us try to do everything by themselves sometimes. You actually said this to me on the phone the other day, that I need to start accepting a bit more help, and I totally agree. And so I sort of wanted to unpack this and just like see your opinion on it, of accepting help and why is it important?
Yeah, well, you don't know everything yourself, so I think that's like a big part of it, obviously. Yeah, accepting help. Like, I think it's something I probably learned to do quite naturally in the last 4 or 5 years. Probably through like football and different things as well. I think like I stepped into a space, and I've spoken about it during sort of like my story and stuff, but a space of sort of arrogance to sort of hide a sense of being sort of shy and not really that confident in myself. But through that, like one of the best bits of advice that I got from a lot of the people around me at that football club is just to take help from people. And I think it's the metaphor of like be the last person at the table to speak. Like listen to what everybody has to say first. Like actually analyze what people are saying. Listen for the information, learn new things. Like you don't know everything. Like nobody's going to know everything in their lifetime. So you need to learn stuff off people that have done it. And I'm a big believer in like, you know, I should say like I'm not really a believer in go and read books and listen to the studies or whatever it is, because at the end of the day, like anyone can write anything about anything. Like yes, evidence and stuff gets supported, especially in things like actual studies that are done or whatever it is. But I feel like the best way to learn is from somebody that's actually lived it and lived the experiences that you're looking to learn about. Like if you want to be a race car driver, no better person to speak to than Lewis Hamilton. Don't go to speak to the news reporter that's written an article on like race car driving. So obviously just an example, but you really do have to be able to accept help as well. Like, so it's one thing to go and chase it, but accepting it from people when they're offering you some advice is, you know, the best thing. Advice is free. Like take what you want from it. Like, but I would never deny yourself the chance to actually learn something new. You might already know it, but don't deny yourself the chance to have somebody just share some knowledge on a specific topic.
So true. And when we are letting go of these attachments as well and these old identities and ways of being, like that's going to take time. Again, that's a process, and it's important to maybe have some people in your corner that can really help you navigate that transition. I was speaking to my beautiful friend Nico, who's from down south. She's also a sound healer, and she's been talking about letting go of like the old ways of being. Like we've both said, you know, partying and excess alcohol consumption does not align with what we stand for as human beings. And now we're almost grieving these old ways of being. Like we've obviously loved to be that person who's been the life of the party back in the day and had so much fun. But now there's a reshaping occurring as we begin to mature. And I think you do grieve aspects of you almost weekly, I'd say. Things change and things come and go, and accepting help from others is just a beautiful way to really navigate that transition.
Yeah, definitely.
Next pillar that came through, which was actually on a song when I was driving here, and it flashed in my brain. It was like, be here in the now. And this is something a lot of people know, but just so that you remember while you're listening and consuming this podcast right now, get back into the here and now moment. Be present, be back in your body. The more mindful you can be, the more peace you will find. So there's a little throwaway. You want to add anything to that?
Not really, no.
Fair enough. It's just something that really helps people when they're in the present moment and they're able to observe their thoughts and not fall into the constructions that the ego can put in place. The more present you are, the more conscious you'll become.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you talk about the like goal setting and stuff like that. So how do you set a goal whilst also just remaining in the present? Because some part of you has to look towards the future to be able to bring that in.
Absolutely. I think you need to stay grounded in the present, but then also dream about the future. So you're dreaming of a future and you're dreaming of a new life and a new way of being, but you can still stay present and anchored in your body. And actually, to bring in those manifestations, I've said this before, but you've got to be grounded on the earth plane in order to actually bring in whatever ideas are floating up here in that spiritual realm where it doesn't actually exist yet. But every creation has come from a thought. And so you just have to have your feet planted on the earth, and then you're able to actually bring that in time.
Yeah, definitely.
So I wanted to throw a question to everyone as well, just to sort of remind everyone of what we're talking about here and get people actually starting to think on maybe a bit of a deeper level. But if you knew your time would be up in 1 week, what would you be doing differently? I think this question just came through and it was like, what would you change if you knew you only had 1 week left?
What would you change?
I would honestly become more present. I would be inherently so present in every moment because I knew that, that time was running out. So I'd be here in every moment. I'd just be really indulging and accessing all of the beautiful things that exist in earth. Like the sand beneath your toes when you walk along the beach, the feeling of the ocean, like I would soak that up a little bit more,
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
What would you do differently if you only had 1 week?
To be honest, like I think of this question often and like I probably wouldn't do anything differently. And I know that sounds like ironic and a bit like whatever to say, but I think if you're living your life, I don't know, it's the point of the question is the thing. Like you're asking the question so people have the answer of like, oh shit, what is it that I actually want to do right now? But I think that's been a big thing for me in the past couple of months is I have been doing exactly what I want to do in my life. And like it's one thing to say like, like, oh, I'd go and travel the world right this second. But like you also need the support behind you to sort of go do that. So I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of a tough question for me to answer in a sense, but I feel like I wouldn't really change a lot. At the moment, I'm pretty content with what I'm doing. And that's one of the things that like I'm happy with where my life's sort of aligning to in this episode. So
yeah, I just think it's a deep question, but it's also a question that really helps you reevaluate your life and if you are actually being integral with what you're doing. I honestly think most of the people that are probably listening to this podcast are people that are tapped in and ready to live a life that's more aligned, but it's just something that you should probably think about occasionally.
yeah, definitely.
Just think about it. Don't manifest it, just think. But I think it's important just to get really clear on your goals and really clear on your boundaries with yourself and others in 2024. If you don't know where you're going, no one else is going to know where you're going either. And sometimes you don't want people to know, but sometimes I think people need to know what the plan is so that they can help you along the way.
Yeah, most definitely.
Finally, 2 things. Obviously, we create a lot of self-trust by feeling our emotions and allowing ourselves to process what's going on inside. So if you haven't felt through some emotions lately, then maybe ask yourself, why aren't you going there? And if you don't think you've got anything that you need to let out, that's fine. Most of the time we do though. So just ask yourself, if you haven't wanted to go there and you haven't wanted to feel through things, just ask why. Get curious with yourself. What scares you about feeling your emotions or speaking your truth? And just begin to journal and unpack that. I think the last tip that I would leave people with for this year is just to make space and time to tap in, to meditate and to listen to what comes in. If you can just take a few moments before you do anything, just to envision how you want to show up, how you want to be, you can be way more intentional with your time and ultimately be more aligned in your life.
Yeah, for sure. Really good advice, I reckon.
Thanks, bro.
Nice. Great episode, and one for people to be inspired for the year ahead. I think, Sanchia, you took the lead a lot on that, but it's something that I think you're passionate about speaking about. And yeah, it was cool just to listen and observe to today. So thank you for sharing.
Thanks for having me share my truth and hold space for that.
Not a problem at all. Anytime. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the What's Wellness podcast. We'll be back with more content for you next week. We hope you all have a very aligned week and can take some of that on board and go from there.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.